Welcome everybody to our Conversations in Research evening. And today we've got two people from the nuclear medicine with a nuclear medicine background who have joined us on our panel to discuss how to get into research and to tell us about their stories and their experiences with doing research in general and also getting a PhD along the way. So I would like to introduce Jason Callahan and Joanne Pinson, and I'll give you each a couple of minutes to tell us where you're working, what you've done in the past, and very briefly outline what research you have done, where you did your PhD, and where you're working at the moment. Jason, do you want to make a start?
Sure, thanks, Macallum. So I am a nuclear medicine technologist. I went to RMIT University and did my degree there. I did my internship at the Austin, spent some time in Singapore working at one of the first PET centres that was getting started in Singapore at a very big private hospital there. I came back, spent some time at the Royal Melbourne before landing my current role at Peter Mac as a nuclear medicine technologist, primarily looking after technical projects at Peter Mac. So my current role is a mix of both a clinical and research role, where I spend 1 or 2 days a week on the floor in the PET centre doing normal technologist duties. And the rest of the time I work on the technical projects and research that goes on in molecular imaging. That includes any new traces that come along, any new drug trials, all sorts of things, pretty much anything research or technical related, I'm sort of involved in getting it through the department. So my PhD really started fairly organically, and you could almost think of it as like a translational research kind of project where we got a new piece of equipment called a respiratory gating system for our new PET scanning. We had that for a good year and we tinkered around with it. Nobody really knew how to use it, what to do with it, what were the best applications for it, even how to run it. And even the vendors were sort of struggling with how to use it. So I took that on as a project for myself. So I've always had a real interest in using sort of researching new techniques and new sort of scanning methods to improve our clinical service. So research for me is all about answering questions to improve our clinical service for our patients. So I knew that this was a new technology that needed looking into, and so I started to got an interest into figuring out how it worked. And at the same time, one of our radiation therapists, Sarah Everett, was just about to complete her PhD. And she had done her PhD through publication, which I'd never heard of before. And so I spoke to her about it and went to a meeting with Macallum, actually, and she spoke about pursuing postgraduate studies through Monash University. And doing a master's or a PhD by publication. So this all seemed very achievable to me. So I had my project that I was really interested in to bring into our clinical environment, which was supported by my managers. I had a pathway that had already been trodden by Everett. I knew that it was an achievable thing to do. So I working with Macallum, I put together a project.
Do you find it difficult to incorporate a project into your full-time work? Or is that something that everyone just does at Peter Mac?
It varies a bit. So I'm a bit lucky in that I've got quite a bit of protected time.
Okay.
So because I'm able to pursue my projects and help other people with their projects a lot more easily than a fully clinical technologist.
So if anyone
wants
to do research, can you get protected time? Is that something you have to earn over a while?
So it's not so much the way that you have to earn, but we try to roster some non-clinical time for every technologist, but being a very busy, fairly large centre now, it's very often people don't get their protected time, so their non-clinical time when people are sick or away, whatever other reason. So for a full clinical technologist, it is difficult, and usually a technologist may only be able to keep one project running, and it may take them a long time to do it, but it's certainly doable. So I would say most of the technologists at Nuc have a little side project of their own that they're pursuing.
That's excellent.
For attending conferences or hopefully for publishing a bit more often, things like that.
Yes.
It is not, but it's definitely possible.
Yeah, and I think at Peter Mac it's easier because you are a very research-focused institution, but people working in maybe private sector or in other public hospitals don't have that luxury. Joe, tell us about you now that you can hear us and we can hear you. How do you go about getting people to engage in research? Because this is what you're doing right now.
I guess it's finding out who's interested in doing research and then trying to identify their interests and then to support them in taking that first step. So whether it be something as simple as a case study where you just do a little bit of research about a disease or a process, and then it gives them a feeling for what it's like, and then that will lead to an output, whether it be a poster or one of the girls is actually writing up a case study at the moment that's just about ready to go for publication. So that gives them a taste without a huge commitment, and it also is probably amenable within the nuclear medicine department because, it's part of the workday where you might see something that sparks your interest and then you can follow it up. And then there are specialists that have also engaged me with staff to do research. So we're doing a CT project at Peninsula with a cardiologist at the moment, and that's going to be probably 12 months or so of research. We engaged with a number of departments around Melbourne looking at contrast extravasation. So there seems to be just conversations, start research and opportunities.
Yep. And what do you think is the biggest need amongst the practitioners out there that we could do to support them getting into research?
That's a good question, Macallum. I think it's just giving, like Jason said, it's having confidence and giving staff confidence and belief that they can do it. And it's not really that difficult. I think the main thing is you need to have a passion or an interest in something, and you need to be curious. So if you have those attributes, that's well on the way. And then if there are lots of resources even around the hospital that you can use. There's the library. I've found the librarians a fantastic resource to engage with, and they will support you doing a literature review if you're interested in something like that. They will help you create a research question, things that you wouldn't realise they would be able to support you with if you don't have a researcher in your own department.
And if you don't have a library, if you're in some little private sector, what do you think can people do to reach out to get help with research? Well, question to both of you.
I would say that you could reach out to, so if you have a particular interest, say in Jason's work, I reckon you could send him an email, and that would be a way that he could start and you could engage with him. And I think just having conversations is a great way to start. And don't be afraid to reach out to people because they'll be very receptive.
Yes, I think that's a very good point, Joe. Jason, have you, since you got your PhD, have people approached you for help, people who have never done research before?
Yeah, a bit. I'm trying to encourage some of our staff members to, right now, actually start formalising some of the projects that they're doing. And
how do you do that?
So often, most of the research that goes on in our centre, a lot of the technologists will come to me because they've known I've done my PhD. I've sort of been down this track, so they come to me for advice on ethics applications and writing protocols and things like that. So when they come to me for this kind of advice, I encourage them. Well, this is very much the same thing that I did when I was doing my PhD. I had a project that I wanted to do. I didn't know how to do it formally.
Sorry.
I from people like Sarah and yourself and Rod and Thomas, and that's how I learned to do it. And so now I can sort of impart that knowledge onto my colleagues. So teaching them how to put in an ethics application, how to formalise a good hypothesis, how to do their literature review, how to do it in more of a formalised way. So a lot of technologists sort of just feel their way through projects. They'll have an idea and they'll just sort of change their question over and over and over until they get to a project. So what I'm trying to encourage our technologists now is to sort of think about it a bit more upfront and do it a bit more formally upfront, so that their projects have a bit more clarity about what their objectives are and things like that. And it's not just for the technologists. I'm also encouraging some of our physicians to do that as well, to be honest. Yes. A lot of them will have a lot of ideas and things that they want to do, but they won't do it in a sort of formal, structured way. So by doing that PhD, they understand the way they should be doing it, and so I can hopefully advise them, the doctors as well as the technologists, in sort of the better way to do research. And slowly but surely, a lot of people are getting some good projects up now, so we'll hopefully help from some of our other technologists soon, which would be very exciting for me.
Yeah, I think it's all about creating momentum. Somebody has to start, and that person then, by osmosis starts to take on a leadership role in this field, and people will be attracted to that person for help, just like you and Joe, you're in that role now. What do you think about mentorship? Do you still have mentors? And what role do mentors play for someone who wants to be more research active and doesn't know where to go and what to do? And how do you go about getting a mentor?
Do you want to go? You go, Joe? Or?
Joe, you go first, yeah, because Joe, you go.
Yes, I have a number of mentors, actually. When I took on this role late last year, it was suggested that I keep a mentor. And so I thought about it carefully, and I thought for me it was important to have someone that knew my strengths and weaknesses, and someone that would challenge me and stretch me. So I chose my old PhD supervisor because we have a great relationship. And he's also out of medical imaging, but he's been involved in medical imaging projects. So I thought he's a really bigger picture kind of guy as well, and I thought that was really important. But I've also now had the opportunity to have an allied health mentor as well. So I think for me that's really important because I've been out of medical imaging for quite a long time. And so learning how to do health research rather than scientific chemistry type research is quite different. And so she's going to help guide me and, again, challenge me to a different way of thinking. And it's really helpful. And that will develop more skills.
I think having a mentor at any stage of your career will be a huge value. And that person can be from any field, doesn't have to be in your field. And in medical imaging and nuclear medicine, there are very, very few mentors available. So look in other fields, look for someone else. And it doesn't really matter if they work in the same area, because their role is to guide you and help you and support you, not to be the content expert. So look out if you don't know what to do, and find somebody who's willing to take you on as a mentee. And then you can start that journey. We had a question that came up. Thank you very much for that question, because it's a really important point. It's about doing your PhD by publication. And Jason, could you explain the process maybe? Because it's not that well known, that you don't have to write a thesis like War and Peace, but you can break it down. Can you go over the requirements for us, please?
Yeah, so the first I heard of the PhD by publication was from Macallum, and she was explaining that you don't have to, like she said, write a giant novel. What you can do is to conduct a series of studies on a single theme. So my theme was 4D PET-CT and lung cancer. And you publish a series of articles, at least 5 or 6 for a PhD, I think it was. And each of those articles becomes a chapter in your thesis. Then you can put that together with an introduction and a discussion to tie all your articles together and your conclusions. And so instead of the big thesis, you end up with a much skinnier thesis. But my feeling was that it was a far more relevant and immediately more impactful thesis than the big ones that they stick in a library and nobody ever reads. So when I heard that was an option, I immediately thought that is something I could definitely do. I don't feel like I could write the big long thesis that people have to take many months off work to complete. I did feel like I would like to publish my work, and if I could also get academic credit for that, it's a perfect match. So that's the path I took, and it's the path I encourage everyone I talk to about doing research. It's how I encourage people. I know everybody's doing projects and a lot of people are publishing. Why not also combine that and get some academic credit and sort of formalise what you're doing a bit better through a university? I think it's fantastic.
Yes, thank you, Jason. Actually, you don't need 5 or 6 papers. In most cases, 4 would be enough. So 4 research chapters, and then on top of it, you would need your introduction and literature review, and then the general discussion at the end, which brings it all together. But what happens when you embark on that PhD journey is that you kind of plan out your study. So maybe every year or 6 months or whatever it is, you publish one piece of work. And that is a bit stressful, but then the stress eases as soon as it's accepted. And then you move on to the next study. And so your stress levels kind of go like that, rather than building up. And in the end, you have this massive amount of work to put together. And the other benefit is that the reviewers can't really fault your thesis once it's been peer-reviewed and published. And we always aim for high-quality journals, so it's really easy to examine. It doesn't take much time, and you know that you're not going to fail once your work has been published. And so it takes away all that stress that we used to be going through and hold students' hands. And we're all really worried about the reviewers' comments, but these days it's not a big deal anymore. So it makes it a lot easier, especially for health professionals who continue working and doing the PhD alongside their work, which is what most people do. Jo, did you do yours full-time or did you do it part-time?
Yes, I was thinking about that, Macallum. Yes, my PhD, because I did undergrad honours, PhD, all of that was full-time. So mine was quite different. So I finished mine in about 4 years rather than 6 or 7 years. And the plan was to do thesis by publication, but the first paper took about 9 months to write. And so we ended up we had thesis by thesis and one publication in the thesis. So it was a mixture. But I agree with Jason that in medical imaging, I think it's a really great way, if you can, is to do it by publication, because I think managing publications is easier when you work part-time, and I think it's much more doable.
Yes, we had a comment about this from Kaz. Thanks, Kaz. And especially if you're doing qualitative studies, it's not always possible to have everything published by the time you're ready to submit. And it's quite okay to have a thesis with publication, where you have maybe 1 or 2 publications and the rest are in more traditional format. So you can do, or you can write it in the old way and have the whole thing unpublished. So it really depends on your study and how well you progress through your degree. And with the supervision team, they will then make sure that you have a thesis that you can submit at the right time. I'm just looking at the questions. Peter, did you want to make a comment about the pathways? Because you've answered a few questions.
Yeah, it was one of the questions, and thanks for the questions, everyone. They're really great.
Yeah.
So the questions was whether you could use a Master's of Applied Science or a Master's of Philosophy pathway to PhD. I was just going to say this is the common way that people often start this if they don't have an honours degree as an undergraduate. And after the first year or so, they can then apply to transfer to a PhD if they've, 1, demonstrated progress, and 2, that they can demonstrate that the project has sufficient depth and substance to transfer to a PhD. So, yes, that is certainly a great option. And a lot of practitioners who have done an undergraduate degree and gone straight to work and want to come back would probably be in that situation. And so being in that situation isn't a barrier for doing a PhD. There is another pathway, which is starting through a Master's.
Yeah. And if somebody has published a paper, they at Monash as a first author, they will automatically be qualified to go into a PhD, or you can do a bridging course. We have a bridging course to get in as well, a graduate diploma. So every institution is a little different depending on where you are. If you are interested, I suggest you call an academic and find out. And you shouldn't be scared about the process, because what you will find is the academic will give you all the support you need, and also then create a supervisory team that will help you in the clinical environment as well. So you've got all your bases covered, and there's always somebody there to help you along. But for most people, they will start off with maybe a smaller project, maybe even an audit. And an audit is a great way to get into research. And some people have even published it or presented it at conferences. I know last year at a conference, an audit won the Best Presentation Award. So you don't always have to go into big randomized controlled trial and do that. Sometimes a study is much more impactful for the immediate audience than something, that you would consider as appropriate research. So we encourage you to think about small bits of questions that you may be able to answer at your site, and then find someone who can give you a hand, whether they are with you at the site or somewhere else. But you can always find somebody if you start searching. I wanted to ask you both also, how do other people in the department value research skills that you're bringing? Do you find that is something that sort of has changed the status in your department? Or is that something that's just sort of, he's got his research skills, but that doesn't change anything about the sort of work he does? Jason, could you address that?
So I guess when I'm doing just my standard clinical work, everybody just treats me the same. So just because I have a PhD doesn't mean I'm a better technologist than anyone else, or I know what I'm doing in a clinical sense better than anyone else in that department, because we've got an incredibly skilled staff. Everybody knows what they're doing. The difference is when the topic of research comes up, and then I'm very much the go-to person when any new new project is sort of suggested, any new technique, any new study that comes along, I'm very much sort of the first point of sort of call for a lot of those projects. So, and having that PhD under my belt and understanding how research works from sort of start to finish has given me a lot of confidence in advising people on how to best conduct their research, or if something has happened, how to deal with that, whatever situation comes about. So, no, nobody really treats me different. It's helped me be a lot more confident in advising people and in research.
Jo, what are your thoughts?
Yes, I agree a lot with Jason. I guess for him coming from a centre of research, it's a bit different to where I am at the moment. So at Monash Health and Peninsula Health, they've not been they don't have much experience in research. And so I think they're really excited to have you there as what they consider to be an expert, though I don't count myself as an expert at all. So I think any ideas, they engage with you, and then we talk about how we might be able to translate that into a project and get some staff on board to become engaged. So I think it's quite different. There's not a lot of researchers, I guess, that I can work with as well, although you're learning about the expertise around the hospital that you can link into.
What about the radiologists or radiation oncologists that you're working with in the department? How do they perceive you in your research roles? And because we know there are barriers often, and how do you think they approach a radiographer or nuclear medicine practitioner or an RT with a PhD?
I would like to think that they will engage more readily and give them more responsibility. So I think you're right, there are significant barriers between radiologists working with radiographers because they perceive radiographers to only be capable of doing the images and not developing further. But I have seen that there is quite a bit of engagement with some of the leading radiographers around Monash, and there is support and discussions together to get ideas off the ground, and radiographers certainly participate and are authors on papers.
Yes, Jason, did you find that there are barriers? Maybe not just in nuclear medicine, but also a bit outside?
Yeah, barriers in terms of
collaboration, encouragement, and so on.
At Peter Mac, we're all, it hasn't felt like that. So I've very much developed some good relationships with the therapists and the radiographers, and whenever there's a project that sort of spans multiple sort of disciplines, we certainly are able to get together and discuss projects quite openly and easily. And I guess doing the PhD has also sort of made them a lot more confident that they can approach us and we know what we're going to be doing, and it's not too much. No, I feel like we do pretty well in collaborating with the different disciplines.
Do you think that your role encourages the radiographers and the RTs and sonographers to initiate and take an active role in research, or are they more likely to sort of follow somebody and just be a more passive research member?
I feel like if my role wasn't there, they may try to, just do things on their own a bit more, perhaps, So by me having some pretty good relationship with my colleagues, they know that if there's a a project that involves a nuclear medicine or PET procedure, they've got a point that they know they can come to and discuss it. But if it wasn't someone like me, if it was just standard clinical technologists that weren't involved in research, perhaps they might just do it themselves without getting our advice. So I think certainly having somebody, sort of a research-focused technologist, really opens up sort of a conduit between the different disciplines. Definitely.
Yeah, and I think this is something that we really all need to work towards. We need to, create roles that put research in more of a focus and allow others to feed off it and gain confidence. And that's something that Joe is very actively doing now. Could you give us some examples, Joe, of other people who sort of have taken the plunge?
Yes, so one of the staff who worked in MRI had the opportunity to go and present some research over in the US and Canada and a couple of months ago, and he approached me to help him with his posters. And so that was a great opportunity because we discussed about how traditionally imaging posters are very wordy, and where I've come from, posters are not wordy. And so we worked together, and I changed things up a bit with him. And when he went to the conference, he said, "Joe, you were right. The posters are so wordy." He said, "My poster stood out so much." He said it was fantastic. So that really made me feel good that we were on the right track and that I was able to help him produce something. And the president of the society spoke with him and said that his poster was fantastic and he should have entered for a prize because he would have won something. So I thought that was great, and it definitely has given him a whole lot of confidence because from that experience, when he was listening to presentations, he said he critiqued the slides, and so it gave him a new insight into how to improve his own presentations, and I was really proud of him taking that initiative.
So had he collected his own data before you came?
Yes, he'd been working on using VR goggles in MRI to improve the paediatric experience. And so
that was his own initiative?
Yes.
And how did he get started in this? Because he had never done research before, is that right?
That's correct. So probably he engaged with Michael Ditchfield, the paediatric radiologist, and so they worked together, and then he went and collected his own data and used his own initiative.
And it was his own idea, right?
Yes.
Yes. So there's a great example of somebody who's never done research, has a great idea, and links up with the radiologist who is happy to help and support him and has a good track record in research himself. And they managed to collect really meaningful data. And I assume he's now writing it up, Joe?
Yes, we're going through that process.
So you are helping him with that?
Yes.
Okay, so this is really, really nice example of the steps somebody can take. And by himself, he probably would never have gotten there, right?
Well, he probably would have, but yes.
Much longer journey.
Yeah, that's right, yes.
Yeah, so you need to reach out to somebody who has an interest and who is willing to help you. And that makes it just so much easier. Did you find that other people had similar experiences? So sorry about my dog in the background and my cats. This is a very practical example. What about people who struggle to even raise a research question? What do you do in that situation?
I guess you take them by the hand and step them through the process. So have a look at the literature, discuss what they're interested in, and then start developing a question. So I actually was working with someone yesterday who's doing a Stepping Into Research program, Eastern Health, and we're trying to develop a question around something that's relevant to them that they're interested in. And so, yeah, we just sort of talk about what their interest is, have a look in the literature. That will help start to formulate the question, and then go from there.
Jason, back to you. What can you remember your very first research activity? Can you remember what set you off on this?
Yeah, I do actually. It was when I just came back from Singapore, and I was working at the Royal Melbourne, and we do a lot of lymphoscintigraphy, which is for looking for sentinel nodes, and we did a few different injection methods, and it seemed fairly arbitrary to me what injection method the doctors were choosing to use in what situations. So for me, it seemed to me that there was one method that was better than another, and I thought that's the one they should be using because we always find the sentinel nodes. So the doctors just kept doing what they wanted to do. The technologists didn't know which one they should be doing. So that seemed like an obvious question to me. So I went back. It was basically just a retrospective review of all the lymphoscintigraphy injections we'd done for the past 12 months. And I looked at the injection technique used and whether or not sentinel nodes were found and whether or not those were positive in surgery. So and then we found one injection method was far more likely to find sentinel nodes than others. And I presented that at the ANZMRRN that year, and that really got me set off down this track. So it was just this obvious question I had that nobody, even really in the literature, couldn't answer because it was only directly relevant to us and our patients and our doctors and our experience. And that had a great impact on our clinical service. And that really just triggered off, well, anytime I've got a question about what we're doing and nobody can really answer it, well, there's an opportunity for a research project. And it sort of just went from there. And
did you have anyone to help you, or did you do this on your own?
So I did seek out the people that I thought were most experienced in that I thought would help me. So I had a great nuclear medicine physician that helped me and advised me what information I should gather, and then he helped connect me up with one of the breast surgeons who gave me access to a lot of his data as well. So really it was just asking questions, and people are all really excited to help you.
Yes.
And anytime you are conducting research or have an interesting and valid question, people are going to help you. You just have to sort of step up and ask and have the confidence to say, I've got this idea, what do you think? And do you think you could help me or advise me along that way?
Yeah, that's a really great example. Thanks, Jason. What do you do about ethics in those situations?
So I know a lot more about ethics now than I did then. So it's really, really important that you think about ethics up front. When you have your question, you need to think about your ethics applications first. It's more important now than ever, and I think you're unlikely to get anything published without an ethics approval. And you shouldn't. It's real. A lot of people see it as a real chore and a real sort of obstacle to research. But I've sort of come to the understanding that doing your protocol for an ethics submission up front really clarifies and solidifies what you're actually trying to do. And so a lot of people sort of have this sort of iterative process. Well, I have this question, oh, it's not quite right, so I'll tweak a little, and I'll tweak it a little until I get a result that I want. It's not really very good research. What you should do is you should have your research question up front, send it into an ethics review. If it's just a low risk sort of retrospective project, it's quite straightforward. And the ethics committees usually have great resources to advise you on how to, and they'll have templates, and they'll have sort of people to talk to about the forms you need to fill in. So it's really important to do that first up. And I think it's a project. And so if you know what you're doing before you start, then your end result will be much better.
And I think,
back then I probably should have thought more about ethics, but I do understand now, and a lot more now about how ethics works, and it's not that hard.
Yes, and I think you can pick up the phone wherever your ethics committee sits, and they will guide you through the process.
Absolutely, and they really encourage you to talk to them as much as you want, because it's really in their interest and your interest for any research being conducted in a hospital has to be done ethically and under their supervision and guidance. So, you just have to call them or email them, and anyone in the ethics committee will give you a lot of help and advice. Yes,
and the other stumbling block that, in my experience, people always raise is stats. People are really scared of stats. Jo, what can people do to overcome that burden? That fear?
Well, I'm in their camp at the moment because I don't have a lot of statistics of the L plates on there. But again, there are often lots of resources around the hospital that you can use, and you can look at papers and what they've done before and follow their protocols if you're doing something similar.
Yeah, it's really important too that you get somebody to help you with that. And if you're scared about it, it's usually not as scary once you start learning about it, and it's very empowering to actually understand what some of these tests do and how they're carried out, because you pick up a paper and it makes sense rather than skipping over the stats and saying, I don't understand this, so I'm not going to read it. So even though it seems like a hurdle in the beginning, once you start learning about it and reading about it, you find out that it's actually really useful information. Peter, you're nodding. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think stats does strike fear in a lot of people, but you'll often find at universities as well as in hospitals, there are statisticians that are available to help people with their research projects. So you just make an appointment and you talk about what your particular problem is. And I guess like an ethics application, it's the sort of thing you need to do at the start of your project, because it's going to influence the way that you design your project and how you put your methodology together. So it's got to come up front, and ethics often ask you not only about how you're going to do things, but how you're actually going to analyse the data as well, because you really want to ensure that the project you've designed is going to be successful and make good use of the patient's time or physician's time or technology.
Yeah. I think we've covered a lot. We're coming to our hour, so I want to start wrapping up. Jason and Jo, are there any comments that you wish to make for anyone who wants to start a research career or wants to speed it up or facilitate it? Can you give them some advice on how they should go about that? Jason, you first.
So for me, I see research as this incredibly valuable thing for technologists to sort of enhance their sort of career. So a lot of the time, a lot of technologists after 5-10 years of clinical work get fairly bored with what they're doing, I would say. And research is this incredible way to really enhance and enrich your career and really sort of bring alive that sort of interest you have in your profession, because nuclear medicine and molecular imaging is just absolutely fascinating if you just start looking more and more into it. So not as hard as you think it is, and there are people around that you can reach out to for advice and help, and just get into it. I think it's sort of reinvigorated my career, and I've valued everything I did in my PhD, and I'm encouraging as many people as I can to sort of formalise the research they're doing and get the enjoyment I did out of it. So I would encourage anyone to get into it.
Thanks, Jason. Joe, any comments?
I think Jason put it very well, but it's important, find something that you're passionate about, because then it won't seem like a chore. And be curious in your work, so don't just go on day-to-day stuff and not challenge what you do. Think about whether you can do it better, and then if you can, there's the research questions straight away. And don't be scared. Have confidence and back yourself, because there'll be plenty of people there to support you. Nobody wants to see you fail. People want to see you successful, and people want to improve what they do every day. So it's up to you guys to drive that and improve nuclear medicine and medical imaging.
Yes, very true. Thank you both for coming along tonight and giving your perspectives. It's very valued. So thank you again. I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you, Peter, for hosting and setting it all up. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This conversation will be uploaded on our webpage, so you can read it again, and you can go back and maybe encourage others to have a browse through it online, because what we want to do is really encourage research and break it down and demystify it and make it easier for people to approach. And Peter is here at Sydney and I'm here in Melbourne, and there's people all around hospitals who can help you. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions, because it all starts with the first step, asking a questions and getting somebody to hold your hand. Thank you, everybody, for your fantastic questions. Do feel free to reach out to us. Kelly is also here, and Caroline Wright. We are the Monash team, there's the Sydney team, and then there's other universities. They'll all be really happy to help you if you have any questions about research or about getting into an MPhil or PhD. There's always pathways available wherever you are. So if there are no more comments, I'm going to wrap up, say good night to everybody. Thank you for being online, and we are going to have another webinar in a couple of months, Peter, aren't we?
That's correct. And Macallum, can I encourage people to email any topics they'd like to have in the webinar? We're really open to covering topics that interest this group, particularly you tonight. So we're pretty easy to contact. We can be contacted through the society, but simply putting in my name to the university or Macallum name, Monash University, and you'll find our email addresses and you can drop us a line. So we'd be happy to try and incorporate any ideas that you have for future webinars.
Yep, excellent. So thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night. Thanks, Macallum. Thanks, Peter.
Bye. Bye.